The castle kitchen smelled of rising bread and simmering herbs, but I barely noticed anymore. After 3 months of scrubbing floors and washing dishes until my hands cracked and bled, the scents had become just another part of my invisible existence. Omega, the head cook barked, not bothering with my name. She never did. Take the midday tray to the king's private solar, and don't dawdle. My heart stuttered. The king's solar. I'd never been sent there before. The rejected Omegas like me, the ones whose wolves had never awakened, whose scent held no allure for any alpha, we were kept far from royal eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Why me? I asked quietly, already knowing the question was a mistake. The cook's lip curled. Because everyone else is busy with actual work, Sarah. And even you can manage to carry a tray without making a spectacle of yourself. Her eyes raked over me with barely concealed disgust. Probably. I bit back the response that burned on my tongue. 3 months ago, I'd arrived at Blackthorn Castle as part of the peace offering from the Silver Creek Pack after the border disputes. But unlike the other Omegas who'd been given positions as ladies' maids or seamstresses, I'd been sent straight to the kitchens, because I was broken, defective. A 22-year-old Omega whose wolf had never emerged, whose bond marks remained stubbornly absent from her skin. My former pack had called me cursed. The rejection from my intended mate, the beta's son who'd taken one look at my unmarked skin and laughed in my face, had only confirmed what everyone already believed. I was worthless. Well? The cook snapped her fingers in front of my face. Are you going or not? I lifted the heavy silver tray, laden with bread, cheese, cold meats, and a pot of tea that smelled of chamomile and something earthier. Valerian root, maybe, for calming. Why would the king need calming? The thought followed me through the winding corridors of the castle, up 3 flights of stairs that left my arms trembling with the weight of the tray. Guards stood at intervals, their expressions carefully blank as I passed. None of them saw me. Not really. Just another servant, another invisible Omega. The king's private solar occupied the eastern tower, and as I approached, the guard at the door held up one hand. State your business. State your business. Midday meal, I said, keeping my eyes down as I'd been taught, from the kitchens. He studied me for a long moment, and I felt his gaze like a physical weight, assessing, judging. Finally, he stepped aside. The king has requested no unnecessary conversation. Deliver the tray and leave immediately. Do not stare. Do not speak, unless spoken to. I nodded, my pulse quickening. There were rumors about King Aldrich whispered, conversations that died the moment someone like me entered a room. They said he'd grown cold since taking the throne 5 years ago, that he trusted no one, isolated himself for days at a time, that he was searching for something, though no one knew what. And then, 3 weeks ago, new rumors had started. Whispers that the king had been afflicted with sudden blindness, that he raged against his disability in private, that his council feared for the kingdom's stability if word spread beyond the castle walls. I'd felt an unexpected kinship with those rumors. To have everything and lose it wasn't that worse, in some ways, than never having it at all. The guard opened the door, and I stepped into the solar. The room was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. Tall windows flooded the space with afternoon light, illuminating shelves of books, comfortable chairs arranged near a fireplace, and a large desk covered in papers and maps. But my attention fixed immediately on the figure, standing by the window. King Aldrich. He stood with his back to me, one hand braced against the window frame. He was tall, taller than I'd expected, with dark hair that brushed his shoulders, and a build that spoke of warrior training despite his royal status. He wore simple clothes, a loose white shirt and dark trousers, nothing like the formal attire I'd imagined, and he didn't turn when I entered. Of course he didn't. He couldn't see me. Your Majesty, I said softly, setting the tray on a small table near the fireplace. I've brought your midday meal. Silence. I should have left then. The guard's instructions had been clear. But something held me in place, a wrongness I couldn't quite identify. The king's shoulders were rigid with tension. His breathing, though controlled, came just slightly too fast. And the hand braced against the window frame was clenched tight enough that I could see the white of his knuckles even from across the room. He was in pain. The healer in me, the part that had spent years learning herbs from my grandmother before she died recognized the signs. Tension, headache, maybe. Or the aftermath of one. The tea I'd brought would help, but he didn't know it was there. Your Majesty, I said again, gentler this time. I've brought chamomile tea with valerian root. For the headache. That got his attention. He turned slowly, and I found myself staring into eyes of stormy gray eyes that looked at me but somehow didn't quite focus. Eyes that carried shadows I recognized all too well, the eyes of someone who'd learned to hide their pain behind walls so high that no one could reach them. How did you know I have a headache? His voice was deep, rougher than I'd expected, with an edge that might have been suspicion or simply exhaustion. I gestured toward the tea, then realized he couldn't see the movement. The valerian root. The kitchens only use it in tea when specifically requested for pain or sleeplessness. And I hesitated, not wanting to overstep. You're holding yourself very still, like movement hurts. A long pause. Then, unexpectedly, you're observant. I notice things others miss, I said quietly. When you're invisible, you learn to pay attention. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of what might have been surprise or recognition. Invisible? Heat flooded my cheeks. I'd said too much. Revealed too much. I should go, I said quickly, moving toward the door. Wait. The command stopped me mid-step. I turned back, forcing myself to meet those gray eyes that couldn't quite see me. What's your name? He asked. No one had asked me that in months. Not since I'd arrived at the castle. Sarah, Your Majesty. From the kitchens. Sarah, he repeated, testing the name. And you know about herbs? About healing? I nodded, then remembered again. Yes, Your Majesty. My grandmother taught me before she passed. He moved then, crossing to the chair nearest the fireplace with careful, measured steps, not the hesitant shuffle of someone newly blind, but deliberate movements, as if he'd counted the steps 1,000 times before. Pour the tea, Sarah from the kitchens, he said, settling into the chair. And tell me, what else do you notice that others miss? The request caught me off guard. I approached the table slowly, lifting the pot with hands that trembled slightly. I notice that you're tired, I said, surprising myself with my honesty. Not just from the headache, tired in your bones, the kind that comes from carrying weight you can't set down. I poured the tea, the steam rising with its calming scent. I noticed that this room is arranged perfectly for someone who can't see everything in specific places. No obstacles between the major points. Either you've adapted very quickly, or... I stopped myself, but he leaned forward slightly. Or, he prompted, or the blindness isn't as complete as people think. I finished quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'd crossed a line, implied something I had no right to imply about the king. But when I dared to look at him, King Aldrich was smiling. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed his face from forbidding to something almost approachable. You are observant, he murmured. He reached for the teacup, his fingers finding it without fumbling. And discreet, I hope? I'm invisible, Your Majesty, I said again. No one listens to what invisible people say. Perhaps that's why I find myself wanting to hear more. He sipped the tea, and some of the tension eased from his shoulders. This is good. Better than the usual swill the healers send. Valerian can be bitter, I explained, but the chamomile balances it, and there's a touch of honey, which helps both the taste and the calming properties. Your grandmother taught you well. He set down the cup. Tell me about her. The request surprised me. Kings didn't ask servants about their grandmothers, but something in his voice, a genuine curiosity that I hadn't heard directed at me in so long, made me answer. She was a healer in my pack. Not the official one, she wasn't Omega enough for that, if that makes sense. But people came to her when the official healers couldn't help. She knew plants, knew how they worked together. I smiled at the memory. She used to say that healing wasn't about fixing what was broken. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one, but about helping people remember how to be whole. Wise woman, King Aldrich said softly. And do you believe that? That broken things can become whole again? The question felt weighted with meaning I couldn't fully grasp. I thought of my absent wolf, my unmarked skin, the rejection that had sent me here. I want to, I admitted, but I don't know if I do." Silence fell between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The king drank his tea while I stood uncertainly, torn between the guard's orders to leave immediately and the king's clear desire for company. "Why are you in the kitchen, Sarah?" he asked finally. "With knowledge of healing, you should be with the castle healers." "The healers don't want me," I said simply. "I'm a rejected Omega. No wolf, no bond marks. They say I'd taint their work." His hand tightened around the teacup. "That's absurd. That's reality, Your Majesty." I moved to gather the tray, ready to leave before I said something else that would get me in trouble. "For people like me, anyway." "People like you," he repeated. "Invisible people?" "Broken people," I corrected quietly. "What if you're not broken?" The question stopped me cold. What if everyone else is simply blind to what you actually are? I really looked at him, and saw something in his expression that made my breath catch. Understanding, recognition, as if he saw something in me that I'd never seen in myself. "I should go," I whispered, afraid of whatever was building between us in this sun-filled room. "The cook will be angry if I'm gone too long." "Come back tomorrow," he said. Not a command, not quite, but close. "Bring the tea again. And Sarah?" He smiled that small smile again. "Thank you for noticing." I fled before I could do something foolish like cry. I returned to the kitchens in a daze, the empty tray clutched against my chest like a shield. The cook barely glanced at me as I entered, already barking orders at 2 other Omegas who were preparing vegetables for the evening meal. "Well," she demanded, "did you manage to complete the simple task without incident?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied, setting the tray by the washing basin. She grunted. "Miracles never cease. Back to the dishes with you." I plunged my hands into the hot water, welcoming the familiar sting against my cracked skin. But my mind was miles away, replaying every moment in that solar. The way King Aldrich had turned toward me, the questions he'd asked, the way he'd smiled when I'd implied his blindness might not be complete. "Come back tomorrow," he'd said. No one had ever asked me to come back before. "You're dawdling again, Omega." "Oh," the cook's voice cut through my thoughts. "If you can't keep up, there are plenty who'd take your place." I scrubbed faster, letting the monotonous work occupy my hands while my mind wandered. Why had the king asked about my grandmother? Why had he cared about my opinions on healing and brokenness? Kings didn't concern themselves with kitchen Omegas, especially not rejected ones, unless the rumors were true, unless his blindness had changed him, made him more aware of those society deemed invisible, or unless, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, he's not what he appears to be at all. That night, I lay awake in the cramped quarters I shared with 5 other Omegas, staring at the ceiling and trying to quiet my racing thoughts. Around me, the others slept soundly, exhausted from their day's work, but sleep eluded me. I kept thinking about King, Aldrich's eyes, the way they'd looked at me but not quite focused, the way his hand had found the teacup without hesitation, despite supposedly being unable to see it. What if he was testing something, or someone? But why would a king need to pretend to be blind? The answer came to me slowly, piece by piece. To see who would take advantage of his weakness. To discover who remained loyal when they thought he couldn't observe them. To find out who would treat him with genuine kindness versus those who served out of obligation or fear. My heart clenched. If that was true, then I'd passed some sort of test today without even knowing it. I'd treated him like a person, not a king. I'd been honest, perhaps too honest, about my own brokenness, and he'd asked me to come back. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with rain pattering against the small window high in our quarters. I rose before the others, dressing quickly in my simple gray dress, the uniform of kitchen servants, and braiding my dark brown hair into a practical plait. My wolf might be absent, my bond marks missing, but I'd been blessed with one thing, my grandmother's green eyes. They were all I had left of her, all that remained of the woman who'd believed I was valuable even when no one else did. "You're up early," murmured Kessa, one of the other kitchen Omegas. She was kind to me, in a distant sort of way, not quite friendship, but not cruelty either. "Trouble sleeping?" "Just restless," I replied, keeping my voice low so as not to wake the others. She studied me with thoughtful dark eyes. "I heard you were sent to the king's solar yesterday." Word traveled fast in the servants' quarters. "Just delivered his midday meal," I said, trying to sound casual. They say he's blind now. Kessa lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. That he rages in private. That the council is terrified the kingdom will fall into chaos if it becomes known. I thought of the quiet man who'd asked about my grandmother, who'd thanked me for noticing his pain. He didn't seem like he was raging, I said carefully. Kessa's eyebrows rose. He spoke to you? Heat flooded my cheeks. Briefly. He asked about the tea, about herbs. Sarah. Kessa moved closer, her expression concerned. Be careful. The king is. There are rumors. About Omegas who've caught his attention. My stomach dropped. What kind of rumors? That he's looking for something. Someone. That he tests potential mates in strange ways. And she touched my arm lightly. I just don't want to see you get hurt. You've been through enough already. The reminder of my rejection stung, even though I knew Kessa meant well. I'm just delivering his meals, I said firmly. There's nothing more to it than that. But even as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. The morning passed in its usual blur of tasks, kneading bread dough, chopping vegetables, scrubbing pots until my arms ached. The cook assigned me to prepare the king's midday tray again, and I tried to ignore the knowing looks from the other servants. This time, I added something extra to the tea, feverfew, for the lingering headache I suspected he still had, and a small bundle of dried lavender on the side, not for consumption, but to place near his pillow, for sleep. Why are you adding extra? The cook demanded, spotting the lavender. His Majesty suffered a headache yesterday, I explained. The lavender will help prevent another. She snorted but didn't object. Don't go thinking you're special because the king spoke to you once, girl. He probably doesn't even remember you exist. Her words followed me through the corridors, echoing my own doubts. Why would a king remember one rejected Omega among hundreds of servants? I was being foolish, reading meaning into what had likely been simple boredom on his part. But when the guard opened the door to the solar, King Aldrich turned immediately at the sound of my entrance. Sarah, he said, and my name on his lips sent warmth cascading through me despite the cool, rain-soaked air. You came back. You asked me to, Your Majesty. I set the tray down, my hand steadier today. I brought the tea again, and feverfew this time, in case the headache returned. He moved to the chair, that same deliberate grace I'd noticed yesterday. It did. How did you know? Headaches like that usually come in clusters, I explained, pouring the tea. For a few days, then they fade. The feverfew should help break the cycle. Your grandmother taught you well, he said again, accepting the cup. Tell me more about her, about your life before you came here. I hesitated, unused to anyone wanting to know about my past. There's not much to tell, Your Majesty. I doubt that. He sipped the tea, his expression thoughtful. You said you were rejected. May I ask what happened? The old shame tried to rise up, but something about his gentle tone pushed it back down. My wolf never emerged, I said quietly. I waited through my 18th birthday, my 19th, my 20th. Other Omegas in my pack found their wolves, received their bond marks, attracted mates, but I remained, unchanged. I touched my unmarked wrist unconsciously. The beta's son had expressed interest before, but when it became clear I was defective, he rejected me publicly, called me cursed. And your pack sent you here. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. They sent all their Omegas as part of the peace treaty, but the others were given positions befitting their status. Ladies' maids, seamstresses, herbalists. I was sent to the kitchens because, I swallowed hard, because I had nothing else to offer. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. When King Aldrich finally spoke, his voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. Your pack alpha is a fool, and the beta's son even more so. I looked up, startled. Your Majesty? Tell me something. Sarah. He leaned forward slightly. When you look at me, what do you see? The question felt loaded with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. I see a man in pain, I said honestly. A king who carries burdens no one else understands. Someone who... I stopped, afraid to continue. Who? He prompted gently. Someone who's hiding, I finished in a whisper. Someone who's testing everyone around him to see who will still value him when they think he's lost what makes him powerful. The teacup froze halfway to his lips. For a long moment, He didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly, deliberately, he set the cup down. You see far too much, Sarah, from the kitchens. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I stepped back, fear rising. I shouldn't have presumed. Don't apologize. He stood, and suddenly the room felt smaller, the air charged with something I couldn't name. You're the first person in 3 weeks to see past the blindness to the man beneath it. Do you know how rare that is? I shook my head, then remembered he supposedly couldn't see the gesture. No, Your Majesty. The council treats me like fragile glass. The servants whisper in pity. The nobles circle like wolves scenting weakness. His hands clenched at his sides. But you brought me feverfew and lavender. You spoke to me like I was simply a man with a headache, not a king who might shatter at any moment. Because that's what you needed, I said softly. Not a subject bowing and scraping. Just someone who saw you. Yes, the word came out rough, almost broken. Exactly that. He crossed to the window, and I found myself following without thinking. The rain had intensified, streaming down the glass in silver rivulets. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice low. But I need your word first. Your complete discretion. My heart hammered against my ribs. You have it, Your Majesty. He turned to face me fully, and for the first time, his gray eyes focused directly on mine. Truly focused, with the sharp clarity of perfect sight. I'm not blind, Sarah. I never was. The world tilted. I grabbed the window frame for support, my mind reeling. But the rumors, the council, everyone says. Everyone believes what I wanted them to believe. His gaze never left mine, intense and searching. 3 weeks ago, I announced my sudden blindness. I let the council fuss and worry. I let the servants pity and the nobles scheme. Also, I could see who would remain true when they thought I couldn't observe them anymore. Why? The question came out as barely more than a breath. Because 5 years ago, someone close to me betrayed the kingdom. Someone I trusted completely. Pain flickered across his face. My former betrothed. She sold secrets to our enemies, information she could only have gained through our intimate connection. When I discovered her treachery, it was almost too late. We barely prevented a full invasion. I remembered Kessa's words about omegas, and the king's strange tests. And you've been searching ever since. For someone real, he confirmed. Someone who would value me beyond the crown and the power. Someone who would treat me with genuine kindness, not because I'm king, but because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I'm simply a man who needed help. The implications crashed over me. The tea, the conversation, you were testing me. At first, he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his scent pine and winter frost with something wild underneath. But Sarah, somewhere between your observations about broken things and your gift of lavender, it stopped being a test. My breath caught. Your Majesty, Aldrich, he interrupted gently. When we're alone, please. Just Aldrich. I'm a rejected omega, I whispered. I work in the kitchens. I have no wolf, no bond marks, nothing that would make me suitable for... I couldn't even finish the sentence. It was too impossible. You have something far more valuable. His hand lifted slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his fingers brushed my cheek with devastating gentleness. You have a heart that sees truth, a kindness that asks for nothing in return, and courage enough to be honest with a king when everyone else tells careful lies. Tears stung my eyes. You don't understand. I'm broken, Aldrich. Whatever you think you see in me is exactly what I've been searching for. His thumb caught a tear that escaped down my cheek. What if you're not broken, Sarah? What if the absence of your wolf isn't a flaw, but a protection? I stared at him, confused. What do you mean? My former betrothed fooled everyone because her wolf was strong, her bond marks beautiful, her omega nature seemingly perfect. His expression darkened with old pain. The council believed her wolf's signature couldn't lie. They were wrong. His hand cupped my face fully. But you've developed sight beyond the wold. Physical. You read people, read situations, see truth without the filter of wolf instinct. That's not weakness, Sarah. That's power of a different kind. The words resonated deep in my chest, touching places I'd thought were empty forever. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Then don't say anything yet. He smiled, that rare, gentle smile that transformed his entire face. Come back tomorrow, and the day after. Let me know you, Sarah. Let me prove that what I see in you is real. And if I'm not what you hope? The question came from that broken place inside me, the part that still heard the beta's son's cruel laughter. Then I'll be grateful to have known you anyway. His sincerity was unmistakable. But I don't think that will happen. My wolf knows truth when it finds it, Sarah. And it's been howling for you since the moment you walked into this room yesterday. His wolf. The Alpha King's wolf was reacting to me, the defective Omega, without a wolf of her own. It should have been impossible. But standing there in the rain-washed light, with Aldrich's hand warm against my face and his eyes full of something that looked dangerously close to hope, impossible suddenly felt like the only thing that made sense. I'll come back, I whispered. Tomorrow, and the day after. Good. He stepped back slowly, letting his hand fall away. And Sarah? Thank you. For seeing past the crown to the man. It's a gift I didn't know I desperately needed. I fled again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the overwhelming realization that somewhere between delivering tea and speaking truth, I'd begun to fall for a king who saw value in the parts of myself I'd thought were worthless. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing connection. Every day at midday, I climbed the stairs to the eastern tower with my carefully prepared tray. The tea varied, sometimes chamomile and valerian, other times mint and lemon balm for clarity, once a blend of rose hips and elderflower, when I noticed the beginning of a cold in his voice. And every day, Aldrich asked me to stay a little longer. We talked about everything and nothing. He asked about my grandmother's remedies, and I shared stories of gathering herbs in the forest at dawn, learning which plants thrived in shade and which needed sun. I asked about his childhood, and he spoke of a lonely boy raised for duty, trained to rule before he understood what ruling truly meant. My father was a hard man, he said one afternoon, standing by the window as rain drummed against the glass. He believed emotion was weakness, that an alpha king should inspire fear above all else. And you don't agree? I asked, adding honey to his tea. Fear is useful, but loyalty built on fear crumbles the moment someone stops being afraid. He turned toward me, his gray eyes, those perfectly seeing eyes that the rest of the castle believed were blind, finding mine with unerring accuracy. Real loyalty comes from respect, from knowing your leader values you as more than just a tool. Is that why you staged the blindness? I ventured. To see who would remain loyal without fear. Partly. He accepted the tea, his fingers brushing mine in a way that sent warmth spiraling through me. But also because I needed to escape the performance. Being king means wearing a mask every moment, strong, decisive, untouchable. I wanted to see what would happen if I appeared vulnerable, if I could find even one person who would treat you like a person instead of a crown. I finished softly. Yes. His smile was tender. And I found you. The words wrapped around my heart, equal parts thrilling and terrifying, because with each passing day, I fell deeper into whatever was building between us. And with each passing day, the reality of our impossible situation grew clearer. I was a rejected Omega who scrubbed dishes. He was the Alpha King of the most powerful wolf kingdom in the northern territories. There was no future where those two facts aligned. But my heart, foolish and hopeful despite everything, refused to accept that truth. Sarah. Kessa's urgent whisper cut through my thoughts as I prepared the king's tray on the 14th day. We need to talk. I glanced around the busy kitchen. The cook was occupied berating a junior servant, and the others were focused on their tasks. What's wrong? You need to be careful. Kessa's dark eyes were filled with concern. People are noticing. The amount of time you spend in the king's solar. The way you prepare his meals with such care. There's talk. My stomach clenched. What kind of talk? That you're using Omega tricks to seduce the king in his vulnerable state. Her voice dropped even lower. Lady Morgana has been asking questions about you, about your background, your rejection, why you were really sent here. Lady Morgana, the Alpha King's cousin and one of the most influential nobles in court. I'd never met her, but I'd heard enough to know she was dangerous, beautiful, cunning, and fiercely protective of her family's power. I'm not seducing anyone, I said, anxiety rising. I know. Kessa squeezed my arm. But it doesn't matter what's true. It matters what people believe. And right now, they believe the broken Omega is taking advantage of the blind king. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. The broken Omega and the blind king, both of us hiding behind masks that the world had forced upon us. What should I do? I asked, hating the fear in my voice. Be careful. Guard your heart. Kessa's expression was sad. Whatever's happening between you and the king, it can't end well, Sarah. You know that, don't you? I did. Of course I did. But knowing something and accepting it were two different things. When I entered the solar that afternoon, Aldrich knew immediately that something was wrong. He'd developed an uncanny ability to read my moods, or perhaps he'd always had it, and I'd simply never had anyone pay enough attention to notice. What's happened? He asked, setting aside the book he'd been pretending to read when the guard had opened the door. I set down the tray with trembling hands. People are talking. About us. About how much time I spend here. His expression darkened. What are they saying? That I'm taking advantage of your blindness. Using Omega tricks to seduce you. The words tasted bitter. Lady Morgana is asking questions about me. Aldrich's jaw tightened, and I saw the Alpha King emerge powerful, dangerous, barely contained. Morgana has no right. She has every right to protect you, I interrupted. She's your family. And from her perspective, I'm exactly what they're saying, a nobody Omega, who's somehow gotten close to you when you're at your most vulnerable. You're not a nobody. He crossed to me in 3 swift strides, all pretense of blindness forgotten in his anger. And you're not taking advantage of anything. If anyone is taking advantage, it's me. What do you mean? He took my hands in his, and I felt the tremor in his grip, not from weakness, but from controlled emotion. I've let this go on for 2 weeks without telling the court the truth. I've been selfish, Sarah. I wanted these moments with you, these conversations where I could just be Aldrich instead of the Alpha King, but I never considered how it might affect you. I wanted them too, I admitted. Every day, I knew I should keep my distance. But I couldn't. I looked up at him, at the storm-gray eyes that saw far too much. I care about you, Aldrich. More than I should. More than is wise. Sarah. My name was a prayer on his lips. I need to tell you something. About why I really staged the blindness. About what I've been searching for. Before he could continue, the door burst open. The guard stumbled backward, pushed aside by a woman who radiated authority and barely controlled fury. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, tall, with platinum hair swept up in an elaborate style and ice-blue eyes that fixed on me with predatory focus. Lady Morgana. So it's true, she said, her voice smooth as silk and twice as deadly. The rumors about my cousin and the kitchen Omega. Aldrich stepped between us immediately, his body a shield. Morgana, you will knock before entering my private solar, and you will explain what this rejected Omega is doing in your chambers unchaperoned. Her gaze raked over me with contempt. Daily, from what I understand, spending hours alone with you while you're unable to see what she's truly doing. I know exactly what she's doing, Aldrich said coldly. She's been bringing me herbal remedies for my headaches and providing intelligent conversation. Nothing more. Nothing more? Morgana's laugh was cruel. Dear cousin, I know you believe yourself a good judge of character, but you cannot see her. You don't know what signals she's sending, what Omega tricks she's employing. I'm not employing anything, I said, finding my voice despite my fear. And I'm not trying to seduce the king. I'm simply taking advantage of a vulnerable alpha. Morgana cut me off. Tell me, little Omega, what did you think would happen? That the king would actually choose a wolfless reject as his mate? That you could trick your way into being queen? Each word landed like a physical blow, because she was voicing every doubt, every fear I'd harbored since this began. That's enough. Aldrich's voice dropped to a growl, and the air in the room suddenly felt charged with alpha power. You will not speak to her that way. I will speak to her however I deem appropriate, Morgana countered. Someone needs to protect you from yourself, Aldrich. The girl is standing right here, I interrupted, surprising myself. And she has a name. It's Sarah. And you're right. I'm a rejected Omega, with no wolf and no bond. Marks. I work in the kitchens because that's all I'm good for, according to everyone who's ever known me. I met Morgana's cold gaze directly. But I've never lied to the king. I've never tried to trick him. And I would never take advantage of anyone's vulnerability, because I know exactly what that feels like. Something flickered in Morgana's expression, surprise maybe. at being challenged by someone so far beneath her station. "Pretty words," she said finally. "But I've seen Omegas like you before, desperate, grasping for anything that might elevate your status. Morgana." Aldrich's voice cracked like a whip. "Leave. Now. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection from Syrah." He moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine, "But I'm beginning to think I need it from you." The shock on Morgana's face would have been comical in any other situation. "You can't be serious. You're actually defending her? An Omega nobody over your own blood?" "I'm defending someone who's shown me more genuine kindness in 2 weeks than most of the court has in 5 years. His grip on my hand tightened. "Now leave. And tell the council I'm calling a full assembly tomorrow at noon." Morgana's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because it's time to stop pretending." He turned to look at me, his expression both apologetic and determined. "Time to tell everyone the truth." Understanding crashed over me. He was going to reveal his deception, admit to the court that he'd been testing them, watching them while they thought he was blind, and he was going to do it because of me, to protect me from rumors and accusations. "Aldrich, no," I whispered. "You can't expose your plan just because of some gossip. The political ramifications are mine to handle." His thumb stroked over my knuckles. "I won't let you be torn apart by the court because I was selfish enough to want time with you." Morgana looked between us, her expression calculating. "What truth, Aldrich? What are you planning to reveal?" "You'll find out tomorrow," he said. "Along with everyone else. Now leave us. Please." The please was a concession to their family bond, but the command underneath was unmistakable. Morgana stood frozen for another heartbeat, then turned on her heel and swept from the room. The moment the door closed, Aldrich pulled me into his arms. I went stiffly at first, unused to being held, but his warmth seeped through my defenses. I melted against him, breathing in his scent of pine and frost, feeling his heart thunder against my cheek. "I'm sorry," he murmured into my hair. "I should have done this sooner, should have revealed the truth before it put you in danger." "I'm not in danger," I said, though we both knew it was a lie. Morgana would not forget this humiliation, and there would be others in court who saw me as a threat to their own ambitions. "Tomorrow everyone will know I'm not blind." He pulled back just enough to look at me. "They'll know I've been testing the court, watching to see who remains loyal versus who begins scheming. There will be backlash, political consequences, but there will also be truth." "And what truth is that?" I asked, though part of me was terrified of the answer. "That I've found what I was searching for." His hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. "Not just loyalty, not just honesty, but someone who makes me want to be the man I was meant to be, not the mask I wear for the kingdom." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I'm a rejected Omega, Aldrich. Even if you're not blind, even if you've been testing the court, that doesn't change what I am." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't change what you are. But what if what you are is exactly what I need?" Before I could respond, he leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead. The gesture was chaste, almost reverent, but it sent electricity cascading through my entire body. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Healing isn't about fixing what's broken, but about helping people remember how to be whole." What if Aldrich was right? What if I wasn't broken at all? What if the absence of my wolf had been preparing me for this, for seeing truth without instinct, for connecting with someone on a level deeper than mate bonds and wolf recognition? "What happens tomorrow?" I whispered against his chest. "Tomorrow, I tell the court I've been testing them, that the blindness was a ruse to reveal loyalty and deception." His arms tightened around me. "And then I introduce you as someone I'm officially courting, with the intention of making you my mate and queen." My heart stopped. "You can't. The court will never accept. The court will accept what I tell them to accept." Steel entered his voice. "I am still the Alpha King, Sarah, and my wolf has chosen. The council may argue, the nobles may scheme, but the decision is mine." "Your wolf chose?" I pulled back to stare at him. "But I don't have a wolf. How can your wolf choose? Someone who has no wolf to answer?" Something shifted in his expression, a mix of wonder and certainty. "Come here," he said, taking my hand and guiding me to stand directly in front of him. "Close your eyes. Aldrich, please, trust me." I closed my eyes, my heart racing. I felt him step closer, felt his breath warm against my face. And then, impossibly, I felt something else. A presence. Not physical, but undeniably real. It brushed against my consciousness like a living thing, powerful, wild, and infinitely gentle. It circled me, sniffed me, assessed me, and then it settled around me like a warm blanket, and I heard a voice that wasn't quite words whisper through my mind. Mine. Mate. Home. My eyes flew open. What was that? My wolf. Aldrich's gray eyes glowed with inner light, the sign of an alpha's wolf rising close to the surface. Eyes flew open. He's been trying to reach you since the first day. And Sarah, he's not concerned that you don't have a wolf of your own, he says. Aldrich paused, seeming to listen to something I couldn't hear. He says you have something better, a light that calls to him, a spirit that sees truth. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I don't understand. Neither do I. Not completely. He wiped my tears with gentle thumbs. But I know this mate bonds aren't just about wolf to wolf. They're about soul to soul. And my soul recognized yours the moment you walked into this room and offered me tea with valerian root. I wanted to believe him. God's how I wanted to believe. But years of rejection, of being called broken and cursed, couldn't be erased by 2 weeks of stolen moments. What if I fail you? I whispered. What if the pack was right, and I am cursed? What if I'm not strong enough to be what you need? Then we'll fail together. His smile was soft. But Sarah, I don't think that will happen. You've already proven your strength in 100 small ways. The way you stood up to Morgana just now. The way you've survived in a pack that rejected you. The way you see beauty in broken things because you understand what it means to be called broken yourself. He leaned his forehead against mine. Let me court you properly. Let me show the kingdom that worth isn't measured in wolf strength or bond marks, but in courage and kindness and truth. Let me prove that the rejected Omega and the Alpha King aren't as mismatched as everyone believes. My heart hammered against my ribs. Everything logical said this was impossible. But standing there, wrapped in Aldrich's arms with his wolf's presence still warm around me, logic seemed like a distant concern. Yes, I breathed. Yes to courting. Yes to tomorrow. Yes to... I faltered, unable to voice the hope that was growing in my chest. Yes to us, he finished for me. That's all I need to hear. He kissed my forehead again, then my cheeks, then with infinite tenderness my lips. The kiss was soft, questioning, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I rose on my toes and kissed him back, pouring every ounce of feeling I'd been holding back into that single point of connection. His wolf surged in response, and I felt it wrap around me even more firmly, claiming me in a way that had nothing to do with marks or bonds and everything to do with choice. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aldrich rested his forehead against mine. Tomorrow will be difficult, he warned. There will be challenges, questions, probably outright hostility from some corners of the court. I know, I said. But we'll face it together? Together, he promised. My rejected Omega and her Alpha King. Your future queen, I corrected softly, testing the impossible words. His smile was brilliant. My future queen, he agreed. If you'll have me. Would I have him? This man who saw value where others saw only flaws? Who made me feel whole when I'd spent years being told I was broken? Yes, I said again. And this time there was no hesitation. Yes, I'll have you. That night, I returned to the kitchen quarters with my mind spinning and my heart too full for words. Kessa took one look at my face and pulled me aside. What happened? She demanded. You look like you've seen the moon goddess herself. The king is courting me, I whispered. Officially. He's announcing it tomorrow. Kessa's eyes went wide. Sarah, that's... She paused, conflict warring on her face. That's wonderful, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The court will... I know what the court will do. I gripped her hands. But Kessa, he sees me. Really sees me. Not the broken Omega or the rejected failure, but me. And his wolf. I broke off, unable to explain something I barely understood myself. His wolf chose you, Kessa finished, wonder creeping into her voice. Despite everything, his wolf chose you. I nodded, tears threatening again. Then you'd better prepare yourself, she said firmly. Because tomorrow, your life changes. Forever. For better or worse, nothing will ever be the same. She was right, of course. Tomorrow, I would stand before the entire court no longer invisible, no longer just a kitchen omega. Tomorrow, I would become something I'd never thought possible, the Alpha King's chosen mate, and may the moon goddess help us both. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, when the entire trajectory of my life was about to shift in ways I could barely comprehend? I lay in my narrow cot, listening to the soft breathing of the other omegas, and tried to prepare myself for what morning would bring. By dawn, word had spread through the servant quarters that the king was calling a full court assembly. The unusual timing only 3 weeks after announcing his blindness had everyone speculating. "They say he's going to name his heir," whispered one of the laundry maids as we gathered for the morning meal. "I heard he's stepping down," countered another. "That the blindness has made ruling impossible. Or maybe," said a voice dripping with malice, "he's going to expose the little omega who's been taking advantage of him." I kept my head down, forcing myself to eat the porridge that tasted like ash in my mouth. Around me, I felt the weight of stares and whispers. News of Morgana's confrontation had spread, twisted and distorted by each retelling. Kessa sat beside me, a silent show of support. "Don't listen to them," she murmured. "By this afternoon, they'll all be eating their words." I hoped she was right, but hope felt like a fragile thing in the face of so much hostility. At 11:30, I was summoned to the Eastern Tower, not by the usual kitchen runner, but by Lord Nathaniel himself, the king's most trusted advisor, and the same man who had served his father before him. "Lady Sarah," he said formally, though his eyes held a hint of warmth. "The king requests your presence in his private chambers. You're to prepare for the court assembly." Lady Sarah, the title sounded foreign to my ears. The cook's mouth fell open. Around us, the entire kitchen had gone silent, every eye fixed on me. "Aye, of course, my lord," I managed, setting down my washing rag with trembling hands. As I followed Lord Nathaniel through corridors I'd walked 100 times as a servant, I noticed how different they seemed now. Guards stood straighter as we passed. Nobles stopped their conversations to stare. A few even bowed uncertain, perfunctory, but bows nonetheless. "You've caused quite a stir," Nathaniel commented, amusement in his voice. "I didn't mean to," I said quietly. "The best disruptions are rarely intentional." He glanced at me, his expression thoughtful. "The king has told me about you, Lady Sarah. About your conversations. Your insights." He paused. "He's also told me what he plans to announce today." My heart hammered. And I think he's either the wisest man I've ever served, or the biggest fool." His smile softened the words. "Time will tell which. But for what it's worth, I believe you're exactly what he needs. What the kingdom needs." The words steadied me as we climbed the stairs to Aldrich's tower. Inside his private chambers rooms I'd never seen before, a small army of servants waited. Dressmakers with measuring tapes, a lady's maid with an elaborate hairstyling kit, even a jeweler with a case of glittering pieces. And in the center of it all stood Aldrich, looking every inch the Alpha King in formal black and silver attire. When his eyes found mine, they blazed with such intensity that my breath caught. "Sarah." He crossed to me immediately, taking my hands. "Are you ready?" "No," I admitted, "but I'll do it anyway." His smile was proud. "That's my brave Omega." He turned to the waiting servants. "Make her look like the queen she's going to be." The next hour passed in a whirlwind of activity. The gray servant's dress was stripped away, replaced by a gown of midnight blue that hugged my figure before flowing to the word, floor in waves of silk. The color, they told me, was the royal blue of the blackthorn line, a deliberate statement. My dark hair was arranged in an intricate style, half up and half down, with small silver pins shaped like wolves scattered throughout. The jeweler fastened a delicate necklace around my throat, a silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. "My mother's," Aldrich said quietly, watching from across the room. "She wore it at her own courting announcement." My fingers trembled as I touched it. "Aldrich, I can't, this is too much. It's not nearly enough." He dismissed the servants with a wave, and suddenly we were alone. He approached slowly, drinking in the sight of me. "You're beautiful, Sarah. You always were, but now," he touched my cheek gently. "Now everyone else will see it too. What if they reject me?" The fear I'd been holding back finally surfaced. What if the council refuses to accept me as your mate? Then they'll learn that their king has grown tired of being ruled by their expectations. Steel entered his voice. I've made my choice, Sarah. The only question is whether they'll support it or fight it. A knock sounded at the door. Lord Nathaniel's voice called through. Your Majesty, it's time. Aldrich held out his arm. Together? I placed my hand on his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine fabric. Together. The walk to the throne room felt endless. Every step brought us closer to the moment where our impossible romance would be exposed to the harsh light of court scrutiny. I felt the weight of curious stares from servants and guards, heard the whispers that followed in our wake. Is that the kitchen Omega? What is she doing dressed like that? The king is actually walking with her. The throne room doors stood open before us, revealing a sea of nobility in their finest attire. The entire court had assembled alphas, betas, and omegas from every noble house in the kingdom. At the front, near the raised dais where the throne sat, I spotted Lady Morgana. Her expression when she saw me was pure venom. The herald's voice rang out. His Majesty, King Aldrich of the Blackthorn line. The crowd fell silent, every eye turning toward us. Aldrich walked forward with that same measured pace he'd used in his solar, the careful steps of someone supposedly unable to see. But his hand on my arm was steady, guiding me with confidence. We reached the dais. Aldrich released my arm and climbed the 3 steps to his throne. I stood at the base, uncertain of my place. Lord Nathaniel materialized beside me, a quiet presence of support. My lords and ladies, Aldrich began, his voice carrying easily through the vast room. Thank you for assembling on such short notice. I have an announcement of great importance. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw calculating glances, ambitious smiles. Many thought they knew what was coming, a resignation, perhaps, or the naming of an heir apparent. 3 weeks ago, Aldrich continued, I announced that I had been afflicted with sudden blindness, a tragedy for any man, but particularly for a king who must guide his kingdom. More murmurs, some sympathetic, others less so. The council has been most solicitous during this difficult time. Many of you have expressed concern for my well-being and the stability of the kingdom. His gaze swept the room, and I saw several nobles shift uncomfortably under his scrutiny. Some of you have been remarkably transparent about your concerns. Others have been more subtle in your maneuvering. Confusion began to replace the calculated expressions. Lady Morgana's eyes narrowed. Which is exactly what I hoped to discover, Aldrich said, his voice hardening. Because I am not blind. I never was. The throne room erupted. Shocked exclamations, angry shouts, the scrape of chairs as nobles rose to their feet in outrage or confusion. Through it all, Aldrich remained seated, calm and commanding on his throne. Lord Nathaniel stepped forward. Silence. His voice, amplified by alpha power, cut through the chaos. The king is speaking. Gradually, the noise subsided, but the anger remained, palpable and dangerous. You deceived us, Lord Harrington accused, his face red with fury. Your own counsel. We've been making decisions based on false information. You've been revealing your true natures, Aldrich interrupted. Lord Harrington, I know now that you approached 3 different rival kingdoms, offering intelligence in exchange for support in a potential coup. Lady Serena, you attempted to bribe the royal healer to confirm that my condition was permanent and debilitating. Lady Serena gasped, her face draining of color. Aldrich continued, methodically exposing schemes and betrayals that had been hidden in the assumption of his disability. Some nobles tried to defend themselves, others simply stood frozen, caught in their treachery. However, Aldrich said, his voice softening, slightly, not everyone failed this test. Some of you remained loyal. Some continued to serve the kingdom rather than your own ambitions. His eyes found Lord Nathaniel. For those of you who passed, you have my gratitude and my trust. But you still lied to us, protested Duchess Elaine, an older Omega known for her political acumen. You made us believe you were vulnerable. How can we trust you now? A fair question, Aldrich acknowledged. And here is my answer. A king who never shows vulnerability never knows who truly supports him. I staged my blindness to see clearly for the first time in years, to separate those who serve the crown from those who serve themselves. He rose from his throne, descending the steps with fluid grace, no hesitation, no careful counting. The transformation from supposedly blind king to powerful alpha was striking. And in doing so, he continued, I found something unexpected. I found something unexpected. His hand extended toward me. Someone unexpected. My heart stopped. This was it. I climbed the steps on trembling legs, placing my hand in his. The touch grounded me, gave me strength as I turned to face the court. This is Sarah of the Eastern Forest Pack, Aldrich announced. She came to Blackthorn Castle as part of the peace offering 3 months ago. She was assigned to the kitchens, deemed unsuitable for higher service because she is a rejected Omega. No wolf, no bond marks, nothing that traditional wolf society values. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, assessing, judging, saw the contempt on many faces. How dare this nobody stand beside their king? But Sarah saw something that none of you did. Aldrich's voice rang with conviction. She saw past my supposed blindness to the man beneath. She treated me with genuine kindness, not because I'm king, but because I was someone in pain who needed help. His thumb stroked over my knuckles. She spoke truth when others offered comfortable lies. She gave freely without expectation of reward. She's a rejected Omega, Lord Harrington sputtered. Your Majesty, surely you cannot be suggesting— I am not suggesting anything. Aldrich cut him off. I am declaring, Sarah of the Eastern Forest is the mate I choose. I am formally courting her with the intention of making her my queen. The throne room exploded into chaos again. This time, the outrage was universal. Even those who had remained loyal looked shocked. Only Lord Nathaniel remained calm, standing guard beside the dais. This is madness. Lady Morgana pushed to the front of the crowd. Aldrich, I understand you feel grateful to this girl, but gratitude is not grounds for mating. She has no wolf, no political connections. No, she has strength of character. Aldrich interrupted. Courage, wisdom, kindness. These are the qualities I need in a mate and a queen, not political maneuvering or wolf status. The council will never approve, Duchess Elaine said, shaking her head. An Omega queen must be able to produce strong heirs. Without a wolf, my wolf has already chosen her, Aldrich stated flatly. He recognized her as mate despite the absence of her wolf, which tells me that whatever Sarah is, she's exactly what our bloodline needs. But how can she be queen? Someone shouted from the back. She can't even shift, can't defend herself. The kingdom will see her as weak. The kingdom will see her as I do. Aldrich's voice dropped to a growl, alpha power rolling through the room like thunder. As someone who survived in a pack that rejected her, who developed sight beyond the physical because she had to, who sees truth that even wolves with all their instincts miss. He pulled me closer, his arm wrapping around my waist in a possessive gesture that left no doubt about his intentions. Sarah is not weak, she's not broken, and she will be my queen. The only question is whether you will support your king's choice or work against it. The threat was clear. Those who opposed this union would be opposing him directly. Your Majesty. A new voice spoke up, quiet but carrying authority. An elderly Omega stepped forward, leaning on a carved walking stick. I recognized her as Elder Miriam, one of the few advisors who'd served multiple generations of kings. May I approach? Aldrich nodded, and the elder climbed the dais steps slowly. She stopped before me, her ancient eyes clouded with age studying my face. Give me your hand, child, she said. I extended my hand, and she took it in her weathered one. For a long moment, she was silent. Then her eyes widened. Extraordinary, she breathed. Your Majesty, have you felt it? The light inside her? My wolf has, Aldrich confirmed. He says she has something beyond wolf spirit, something that calls to him. Elder Miriam nodded slowly. There are old stories, she said, addressing the court. From before we relied solely on wolf bonds and physical marks. Stories of Omegas blessed by the moon goddess herself. Omegas whose power lay not in their wolf, but in their spirit. We called them moonborn. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. That's just legend, Lady Morgana protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Elder Miriam turned to her. We've grown so focused on what we can see, wolf strength, bond marks, physical power that we've forgotten there are other gifts, other forms of strength. She looked back at me. This one sees truth. Her spirit shines clear and bright. I would wager she has gifts we haven't even begun to understand. Gifts or not, Lord Harrington said stubbornly, she's still a rejected Omega from a minor pack. The political ramifications will be handled, Aldrich said firmly. I am still your king. My word is law. And I say that Sarah will be courted as my mate and future queen. Those who support this decision will continue to enjoy my favor. Those who do not. He let the sentence hang, unfinished but unmistakable. The nobles exchanged glances. I could see the calculations happening who could afford to oppose the king, who needed to maintain his favor, who genuinely believed versus who simply wouldn't risk his wrath. Finally, Lord Nathaniel knelt. I support my king's choice, he said clearly. Lady Sarah has proven herself worthy in my eyes. One by one, others followed, some with genuine acceptance, others with obvious reluctance, but they knelt nonetheless, acknowledging if not embracing the decision. Lady Morgana was one of the last to kneel. Her ice-blue eyes never left my face, and I saw the promise there this wasn't over. She would accept the king's decree publicly, but privately, she would work against me. When the last noble had knelt, Aldrich raised his hand. Rise, he commanded. The court is dismissed. The formal courting period will begin immediately. In 3 months' time, if all parties remain willing, the mating ceremony will occur. 3 months. 90 days to prove I could be the queen they needed. 90 days for the court to either accept me or tear me apart. As the nobles filed out, murmuring among themselves, Aldrich turned to me. Are you all right? He asked quietly, his thumb brushing my cheek. I think so. I managed. That was. Terrifying? Exhilarating? Both? All of that and more. I looked up at him, this alpha king who'd chosen me despite every logical reason not to. Aldrich, what Elder Miriam said about moonborn omegas, do you really think that's what I am? I think you're exactly what you need to be, he said. Whether that's moonborn or simply Sarah brave, kind, true, doesn't matter to me. My wolf chose you. My heart chose you. The rest is just details. Details that will determine whether your kingdom accepts me or revolts, I pointed out. Then we'll face that together. He pulled me into his arms, heedless of any servants who might still be watching. You and me against the court politics and ancient prejudices. Think we can win? I thought. About my grandmother's words about healing, not being about fixing what's broken, but remembering how to be whole. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from rejected Omega to the Alpha King's chosen mate. And I thought about the light Elder Miriam had sensed, something I'd never known I possessed until Aldrich had seen it first. Yes, I said, conviction growing with each word. Yes, I think we can win. Because we're not fighting for power or status. We're fighting for something real. For love, he murmured against my hair. For love, I agreed. And for the truth that worth isn't measured in wolf strength or bond marks, but in courage and character. He pulled back just enough to kiss me properly this time, deeply, with all the passion and promise of the bond growing between us. His wolf rose to the surface, wrapping around me like a living presence, claiming me in every way that mattered. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The rejected Omega and her Alpha King, the Moonborn, and the ruler who'd seen her light. 2 broken pieces that somehow fit together perfectly, creating something whole and beautiful and unbreakable. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. Epilogue 3 months later. The mating ceremony took place under the full moon, in the same throne room where Aldrich had first announced his choice. But now the space was transformed, filled with moonflowers and silver decorations, packed with nobles who had slowly, grudgingly, come to accept their unusual queen. I wore a gown of pure white with silver embroidery, the crescent moon pendant at my throat. My hair was loose, flowing down my back in dark waves, and on my wrist, impossible but undeniable, was the faint shimmer of a bond mark. It had appeared 2 weeks ago, not the traditional mark of wolf to wolf, but something different. Elder Miriam had called it a spirit bond, rare and precious, proof that the moon goddess herself had blessed our union. As I walked down the aisle toward Aldrich, I saw familiar faces. Kessa, beaming with pride. Lord Nathaniel, nodding his approval. Even Lady Morgana, who had very gradually softened her opposition once she'd seen how the kingdom was responding to their unconventional queen. Because in the 3 months of courting, something unexpected had happened. The people had embraced me. Stories had spread of the rejected Omega who'd won the Alpha King's heart. of the woman who saw truth where others saw only surfaces, of the moonborn queen who represented hope for every wolf who'd ever felt less than enough. I'd visited villages and met with commoners. I'd established a healer's program using my grandmother's knowledge. I'd proven, day by day, that I could be the queen they needed, not despite my differences, but because of them. Aldrich waited at the altar, magnificent in black and silver. His gray eyes glowed with inner light as I approached. When I reached him, he took my hands, and I felt his wolf surge forward to greet whatever lived inside me that light Elder Miriam had sensed, that spirit that called to him. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying through the throne room, "you came to me as a servant, invisible and rejected, but you've become my greatest treasure, my truth seer, my heart's home." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "And you saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I thought I was worthless, loved the broken pieces no one else wanted." "Never broken," he corrected gently. "Just waiting for someone who could see your true worth." The high priest performed the ceremony traditional words and rituals, but with special additions for a moonborn mating. When it came time for the claiming bite, Aldrich paused. "This will hurt," he warned quietly. "Are you sure?" I tilted my head, exposing my throat. I've never been more sure of anything. His teeth sank into the tender skin where neck met shoulder, and I gasped not from pain, but from the sudden rush of connection. His wolf, his heart, his very soul pouring into me through the bite. And impossibly, something in me answered that light, that spirit, rising up to meet him. The bond snapped into place like a key turning in a lock. Perfect. Inevitable. Right. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. "Mine," he growled, the word resonating with alpha power. "Yours," I agreed. And then, feeling bold, I added, "And you're mine." His laugh was joyous. "Always, my moonborn queen. Always." The court erupted in cheers, genuine this time, not forced. As Aldrich kissed me before the kingdom, sealing our bond, I felt something I'd never expected to feel. Whole. Not because he'd fixed my brokenness, but because he'd helped me see I'd never been broken at all. Just waiting. Just becoming. Just learning to recognize my own worth, reflected in the eyes of an alpha king who'd pretended to be blind so he could finally see clearly. And in that moment, surrounded by moonlight and love and impossible possibilities, I knew my grandmother had been right all along. Healing wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about remembering how to be whole. And I had finally, beautifully, remembered. 3 months later, the first rays of dawn painted the castle walls in shades of gold and rose, but I'd been awake for hours. Today was my mating ceremony, the day I would officially become Queen of Blackthorn, mate to Alpha King Aldrich, and living proof that the moon goddess had a sense of irony. From rejected Kitchen Omega to Queen in 3 months. It still didn't feel real. "You're thinking too much again," Kessa said from behind me, her reflection appearing in the mirror where I sat. "I can practically hear your doubts from across the room." I smiled at my friend, no longer just another Kitchen Omega, but now my personal lady's maid and closest confidant. Can you blame me? In a few hours, I'll be standing before the entire kingdom, claiming a bond that shouldn't exist with a king who pretends to be blind to see the truth. "A king who loves you," Kessa corrected, beginning to brush my hair with gentle strokes. "A kingdom that's coming to adore you, and a bond that the moon goddess herself has blessed, if Elder Miriam is to be believed." I touched my wrist where the spirit bond mark had appeared 2 weeks ago, a delicate pattern of silver that looked like moonlight captured beneath my skin. It wasn't the traditional bond mark of wolf to wolf, but something else entirely. Something that made Elder Miriam weep with joy and declare that the old magic had finally returned. "Tell me again how you're not special," Kessa teased, noticing my gesture. "Go on, I dare you." Before I could respond, a knock sounded. At the door, Elder Miriam entered, leaning heavily on her carved walking stick, but moving with surprising energy for someone over 90 years old. "The moonborn bride awakens," she said with satisfaction. "Good. We have much to do before sunset, and I won't have you facing this ceremony unprepared." "Unprepared?" I echoed. "Kessa and I have been planning for weeks. I'm not talking about dresses and flowers, child." Elder Miriam settled into a chair with a grunt. "I'm talking about what comes after. The challenges you'll face as queen. The gifts you're only beginning to understand. My stomach tightened with nerves. Over the past 3 months, strange things had been happening. Moments where I seemed to sense emotions from others, not reading minds exactly, but feeling the truth beneath their words. Times when herbs responded to my touch in ways that defied normal explanation. Growing stronger, more potent. Once, when a child in the village had fallen ill with a fever a healer could break, I'd placed my hands on her forehead and felt something flow through me that light, Elder Miriam kept mentioning, and the fever had broken within minutes. I still don't understand what I am, I admitted quietly. Moonborn sounds like something from fairy tales. All fairy tales start with truth, Elder Miriam replied. Centuries ago, before we relied solely on wolf bonds and physical strength, there were omegas blessed by the moon goddess, born without wolves of their own, but gifted with something deeper, the ability to see and influence the spirit realm, to heal not just bodies, but souls. She leaned forward, her clouded eyes somehow seeming to see straight through me. You are one of them, Sarah, the first to emerge in over 200 years. But why me? The question that had haunted me for 3 months finally escaped. Why not someone stronger? Someone with training? Someone who actually knew what they were doing? Because the moon goddess doesn't be fined. Choose the prepared, Elder Miriam said with a slight smile. She chooses the willing. And you, child, have been willing from the start. Willing to help a king in pain without knowing his identity. Willing to speak truth when lies would have been safer. Willing to love when your heart had every reason to remain closed. Tears pricked my eyes. I'm terrified, I whispered. Of failing him. Of failing the kingdom. Of proving everyone who called me broken was right all along. Kessa's hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. Elder Miriam simply nodded as if she'd expected this confession. Fear is wisdom, the elder said. Only fools approach power without fear. But let me tell you what I see when I look at you, Sarah of the Eastern Forest. She rose, crossing to where I sat, and placed one weathered hand over my heart. I see a woman who survived rejection and emerged with compassion instead of bitterness. I see a healer who understands that some wounds are invisible. I see a queen who will rule not through dominance, but through truth. Her hand moved to rest on my head, and I felt a tingle of energy, subtle, warm, like sunlight after rain. And I see a mate bond so powerful that it's already changing this kingdom, she continued. The people aren't just accepting you, Sarah. They're embracing what you represent, hope for every wolf who's ever felt less than enough. Proof that worth isn't measured in strength alone. The nobles still doubt, I said, thinking of Lady Morgana's calculating stares, Lord Harrington's barely concealed contempt. Some always will, Elder Miriam acknowledged. But watch what happens today. Watch how the people respond. And remember, you don't need everyone's approval, child. You need only to be true to yourself and to the bond you share with your king. A commotion in the hallway interrupted us. Raised voices, one of them distinctly Aldrich's, tinged with frustration and amusement. Nathaniel, I am not staying away from my mate, on our mating day because of some ridiculous tradition. Your Majesty, it's considered unlucky. I make the traditions around here. The door burst open, and Aldrich stood in the threshold, Lord Nathaniel behind him trying and failing to look stern. When Aldrich's eyes found mine, everything else faded. He'd clearly been training, his hair was damp from washing, and he wore only loose trousers and a half-fastened shirt that revealed the lean muscles of his chest and abdomen. His gray eyes blazed with that inner light that always appeared when he looked at me, his wolf rising close to the surface. Aldrich, I breathed, drinking in the sight of him. You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. That's for marriages where the couple doubts their choice, he interrupted, crossing the room in 3 swift strides. I have no doubts, Sarah. None. He pulled me to my feet, his hands framing my face with achingly tender care. I woke up and you weren't there, my wolf demanded. I find you. Make sure you hadn't changed your mind, that you weren't having second thoughts about binding yourself to a king who staged blindness to expose his court's treachery. Never, I said firmly, covering his hands with mine. No second thoughts, just... I hesitated, then decided on honesty. We'd built everything on truth. Just fear that I won't be enough, that the kingdom needs someone stronger, more accomplished, more... He silenced me with a kiss deep, possessive, claiming. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, and I could feel his wolf pressing against the boundaries of his control, desperate to mark me, claim me, Complete the bond. You are everything, he said fiercely. Everything I need. Everything the kingdom needs, even if some are too blind to see it yet. Your Majesty. Lord Nathaniel coughed diplomatically from the doorway. Perhaps you could save the claiming for the actual ceremony? We do have a schedule. Schedule be damned. Aldrich growled, but he loosened his hold on me fractionally. He turned to Elder Miriam, who was watching with undisguised satisfaction. Tell her what you told me last night. Elder Miriam's smile was knowing. I told His Majesty that the bond you two share is the strongest I've seen in my 93 years. That your moonborn gifts are already complementing his alpha power in ways that will make this kingdom unprecedented in its strength and stability. The villages you visited last month, Aldrich added eagerly. The crops that suddenly thrived after you blessed the fields. The sick children who recovered after you touched them. The disputes between families that resolved after you mediated Sarah. You're already changing this kingdom for the better. I'm just doing what feels right, I protested. Exactly, Aldrich and Elder Miriam said in unison. A laugh bubbled up despite my nerves. Is everyone conspiring to convince me I'm not about to make a terrible mistake? Yes, Kessa said from where she'd been tactfully examining the wedding dress. Now, Your Majesty, who shouldn't be here, please leave so we can actually prepare your mate for the ceremony, or would you prefer she show up in her mourning robe? Aldrich's eyes darkened as he took in my state of undress beneath the silk robe. I wouldn't object, he murmured, low enough that only I could hear. Heat flooded my cheeks. Aldrich. Fine. He pressed one more quick kiss to my forehead. But Sarah, when you walk down that aisle tonight, remember this. I'm not marrying you because you're moonborn or gifted or politically advantageous. I'm marrying you because you brought me tea with valerian root and saw a man instead of a crown, because you understand what it means to be invisible and chose kindness anyway, because my wolf recognized his mate the moment your scent reached him. His hand covered my heart. This is what I'm claiming tonight. Not your gifts, not your potential power. This your courage, your truth, your heart. Tears spilled over, and I didn't bother to wipe them away. I love you, I whispered. So much it terrifies me. Good, he whispered back. Terror means it matters. And tonight, before the moon goddess and the kingdom, I'm going to show you exactly how much you matter to me. Lord Nathaniel physically pulled Aldrich toward the door, muttering about impossible kings and abandoned traditions. But Aldrich's eyes held mine until the door closed between us, and I felt his wolf reach through our incomplete bond, brushing against that light inside me with fierce possessiveness. Soon, his presence seemed to say. Soon you'll be truly mine, and I'll be truly yours. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Kessa helped me into the mating gown, pure white silk that flowed like water, with silver embroidery and patterns of wolves and crescent moons. The dress was designed to bare my shoulder and throat for the claiming bite, elegant, but undeniably vulnerable. Elder Miriam blessed me with words in the old tongue, anointing my forehead with oil infused with moonflower. The goddess sees you, moonborn child, she intoned. Walk in her light, trust in the bond, let your spirit shine. As sunset approached, my nerves crystallized into something sharper. Not fear exactly, but anticipation so intense it bordered on pain. In hours, I would be marked, claimed, bound to Aldrich in a way that could never be undone. His queen, his mate, his equal in all the ways that mattered. The throne room had been transformed. Hundreds of moonflowers draped every surface, their white petals glowing in the candlelight. Silver ribbons hung from the ceiling like waterfalls of captured starlight, and at the center of it all stood an altar draped in midnight blue, waiting for the ceremony that would change my life forever. The room was packed nobles in their finest attire, common folk who'd been given special permission to attend, representatives from allied pacts and kingdoms. Everyone wanted to witness this unprecedented mating, the Alpha King and his moonborn queen. As I waited behind the great doors, Kessa adjusted my hair one final time. Ready? She asked. I touched the crescent moon pendant at my throat, Aldrich's mother's necklace, a symbol of acceptance and belonging. Yes, I said, and meant it. I'm ready. The doors opened. Music swelled not the traditional mating drums, but something softer, more ethereal. I began the long walk down the aisle, every eye upon me. I saw Lord Nathaniel, pride evident in his usually stoic face. Duchess Elaine, who'd become an unexpected ally, offering an encouraging nod. even Lady Morgana, whose expression had softened from outright hostility to grudging respect. But mostly, I saw Aldrich. He stood at the altar in formal black and silver, but his eyes held only warmth as they tracked my approach. His wolf was visible just beneath the surface, his alpha power radiating through the room, in waves that made other wolves drop their gazes in automatic submission. Except me. I'd never been able to drop my gaze around him. Even when I'd thought he couldn't see me, I'd always looked directly at him, seeking the man beneath the crown. When I reached him, he took my hands, and the incomplete bond between us flared to life silver light visible to everyone in the room. Gasps echoed through the throne room. This was proof, undeniable and public, that our bond was real and blessed. The high priest began the ceremony, his words washing over me as I stared into Aldrich's eyes. When it came time for the vows, Aldrich spoke first. Sarah of the Eastern Forest, called broken by those who couldn't see your worth, you came to me bearing tea and truth. You saw past blindness, both mine and the world's, to the heart beneath. You taught me that strength comes in many forms, and that love built on honesty is stronger than any alliance built on convenience. His voice grew rough with emotion. I claim you as my mate, my queen, my equal in all things. My wolf has chosen. My heart has chosen. And I will spend my life proving worthy of the gift you are. My turn. I took a shaky breath, then spoke the words I'd been composing for 3 months. Aldrich, Alpha King of Blackthorn, you saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I thought I was worthless. You taught me that being different isn't the same as being broken, and that true sight has nothing to do with eyes. Tears streamed freely now. I claim you as my mate, my king, my home. Whatever gifts the moon goddess has blessed me with, they're yours. Whatever future awaits us, we'll face it together. My spirit has chosen, my heart has chosen, and I will spend my life loving every part of you, the king and the man who just wanted someone to see him truly. The high priest smiled. Then, by the power vested in me by the moon goddess herself, and witnessed by this gathering, I declare these two mates. Let the claiming bite seal what has already been written in the stars. Aldrich pulled me close, his hand cradling the back of my head. This will hurt, he warned, echoing his words from 3 months ago. Are you sure? I tilted my head, exposing my throat in ultimate trust. Mark me. Claim me. Make me yours. His teeth sank into the tender flesh where neck met shoulder, and I gasped, not from pain, but from the overwhelming rush of connection. His wolf, his heart, his very soul poured into me through the bite. Every memory, every fear, every hope flooded through our bond. I saw him as a lonely child, raised to rule but never truly seen. Saw the betrayal that had shattered his trust. Saw the moment he'd first caught my scent in the great hall and his wolf had risen, howling mate with such ferocity he'd barely contained it. Saw every conversation we'd shared replayed from his perspective. Saw how I'd looked to him brave and kind and real in a world of pretense. And impossibly, something in me answered. That light Elder Miriam kept sensing rose up like a tide, meeting his wolf with a presence of its own. Not a wolf, but something equally powerful. Pure spirit, pure truth, pure love. The bond snapped into place like thunder, and everyone in the throne room felt it. The force of our connection rippled outward, making candles flare brighter, making moonflowers release their scent in a wave of intoxicating perfume. When Aldrich pulled back, his eyes were blazing silver pure alpha, pure wolf. Mine, he growled, the word resonating with power that shook the very stones of the castle. Yours, I agreed, my voice somehow carrying equal weight despite my lack of wolf. And then, feeling the bond settle into place, solid and eternal, and you're mine, Aldrich, now and always. His answering smile was fierce with joy. Now and always, my moonborn queen. He kissed me then, sealing our bond before the kingdom. The throne room erupted in cheers, genuine, celebratory, accepting. As Aldrich held me close, I felt the bond pulse between us, stronger than any force I'd ever known, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that Elder Miriam had been right. I wasn't broken. I'd never been broken. I'd been waiting, becoming, growing into exactly who I needed to be to stand beside this king and help him reshape a kingdom that valued truth over tradition, substance over appearance, love over political maneuvering. The rejected Omega had become queen. The pretend blind king had finally seen clearly, and together, we would show the world that the most powerful bonds aren't the ones that follow tradition. They're the ones that follow truth. As the celebration began, and Aldrich led me through the crowd of well-wishers, his hand never leaving mine, I sent a silent prayer of gratitude to my grandmother. "You were right," I told her spirit wherever it dwelled. "Healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering how to be whole. And I've finally remembered. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.